Hi, this is Paul, and this is Rough Draft for Sunday, where I take a look at the sermon that I'll be working on Sunday. If you're unfamiliar with the Bible, and you are familiar with YouTube, I often recommend checking out the Bible Project and their videos because they run through every book of the Bible, and lately they've been doing concepts from the Bible, and in my opinion, they do a terrific job. The book of Ecclesiastes is a favorite book of skeptics. The book of Ecclesiastes is philosophical, and it wrestles with the big issues of life, and it wrestles with the issues in ways that many people, even if they're unfamiliar with the rest of the Bible, can identify with. The book of Ecclesiastes is the story of an alpha male. Now, an alpha male is someone who has risen to the top of his hierarchies, and usually a number of things go along with that: wealth, power, women, access to pleasure, legacy, all sorts of different things. And here I have a variety of pictures: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Carnegie, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Howard Hughes. Now, not all of these people are the same by any means, and they had different moral systems, and they lived their lives in different ways, and they had different chapters in their lives, but all are, I think, good examples of alpha men, men who have risen to the top and enjoyed the fruits of their labor of one kind or another, and in some cases also a fair amount of suffering and despair. Now, the Old Testament vision of wisdom is a little bit different from our English use of the word. Contemporary definitions lean towards virtuous or moral posture according to contemporary moral standards, but in the Old Testament, wisdom isn't quite weighed the same. Those elements are in it, but there's also a heavy degree of success, excellence, skill, shrewdness, craftiness, the ability to climb ladders and hierarchies, the ability to get things done, the ability to win. But you always know God in Old Testament wisdom. You always know that God is at the top of all hierarchies. There's always a bigger fish. And so wisdom literature will often remark on the amazing skill, success, and productivity of certain individuals, but often gives them a warning that climbing too high and too far, you'd better know and you'd better respect the one who's at the top. Now, in our current moment in culture, you can't help but think of Donald Trump, the current president, as in many ways the archetypal alpha male. He loves winning, and he's a climber, and he's all about his own personal brand. His name on the side of the plane before he had Air Force One to drive around with, showing his wives and his children as emblems, dressing up as trophies. He sings, "I did it my way" at the inaugural ball. He would have had a harem if contemporary moral standards would dictate. And so some of that is the source of some of his problems. But he builds great towers and beautiful buildings and institutions, and he puts his name on it. And in his younger days, he flaunted being a playboy. And that was Donald Trump. I grew up in just outside of New York City, and I his name was in the news for all of these kind of things for a very long time. But what does it mean? What is its value? What is its worth? In many ways, the book of Ecclesiastes wrestles with this. I, the teacher, was I, the teacher, was king over Jerusalem, over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun, all of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Now that word that gets translated meaningless, hevel, is a rich word, and meaningless is part of its sense. Sometimes it's vanity. It's a chasing after the wind. It's something that looks good and seems solid, but you once you try to get your hand around it, it flees you. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. You can see here he's in some ways he's an ancient scientist. He's exploring the world with trial and error, and he's trying to figure out how things work. That's very much the focus of ancient wisdom. I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind, seeking wisdom. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? Chasing after the wind. I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. And this is a big part of his analysis, where he is on one hand indulging himself and withholding nothing from himself, but at the same time keeping a step back to watch and asking himself, does this satisfy? Does this give meaning? Does this finally land me where I want? Is my heart finally filled with satisfaction from its desires? I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens. Now, that under the heavens is also an important phrase because this entire story is told from under the heavens. And intentionally so, he holds back from religious contemplation and wants to know, without the gods, without heaven, what can you know and do under the sun? Can you find satisfaction? I wanted to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. In other words, he never succumbed to these desires fully in a way that would trip him up or cause him to stumble or cause him to lose his place in the hierarchy. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all of my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet I surveyed all that my hands had done, what I had toiled to achieve. Everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things that I toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish, yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What do people get for all their toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. A person can do no better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction for their own toil. Maybe if I just lower my expectations and rein them in and just not expect too much out of life and not strive, but simply be content with whatever level I have. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. There's a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I've seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. So there we are. We're in the moment. There's a time for all these things, and in their moments, in their time, things reach their peak and their glory, and then they decay and they pass away. Yet in our hearts, God has set eternity, a longing for permanence, a longing that all of the teacher's strivings could not fully satisfy. The book of Ecclesiastes ends on a decidedly religious note, because one of the things that the teacher is wrestling with throughout the whole book is that death is the great equalizer. It grabs us all, the righteous and the unrighteous, the happy and the sad, the wise and the fool, the wealthy and the poor. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark, and the clouds return to the rain, when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim, when the doors to the street are closed and the sound of grinding fails, when people rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint, when people are afraid of heights and dangers in the street, when the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags itself along and desire no longer is stirred, then people go to their eternal home, and mourners go about the streets. Remember him before the silver cord is severed, the golden bough is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, and the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. But again, everything is vanity. Everything seems solid, but then drifts through our hands, and our place remembers it no more. The words of the wise are like goads. What are goads? Goads are like these, sometimes called in other translations like the pricks. They're the hard things. The goads are what you poke the cow with to get the cow to move. The words of the wise are like goads. They unsettle us. They make us uncomfortable. They're collected saying like firmly embedded nails. We don't want this. We want to live in indulgence. We want to follow the broad and easy path given by one of the words of the wise are like goads. They're collected sayings like firmly embedded nails, given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Fear God and keep his commandments is the summary of the book. What do I mean by within the alpha, within the alpha male. And because the book is to the alpha male, it's this is it. This is the summary. This is what you can know under the sun. I want to also introduce, though, the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation is in some ways heir of the prophetic books, but there's a sense in which Revelation is the global partner to the individualistic Ecclesiastes, with the addition of the revelation of Jesus Christ. Because, as people commonly make the mistake, the book is not Revelations, referring to all of the revelations within it as if they were haphazard or ad hoc. The book is about the revelation of Jesus Christ. And in many ways, the book of Revelation is an updating of the Old Testament, taking the imagery and the symbolism and turning it up full volume. Ecclesiastes looks at meaning for the individual and questions how to live under the sun before the revelation of Jesus, the Son of Man. It's about the struggles in one's own heart that are common to us all. Revelation looks at the whole world story and the struggle for human destiny. And these two, we should play off each other. The best we can do, says the book of Ecclesiastes, that can be had under the sun is like chasing after the wind. Death comes and takes us and equalizes us. Fear God and keep his commandments, the book advises. But we've accelerated Advent. We've come to Christmas. What is that about? The Son of Man has come. The monsters of the world spend themselves in vain. Read Daniel 7 or the entire book of Revelation. This chasing after the wind is in fact chasing after the wind. And one must penetrate and ask, what will endure? The battle is fierce, so be bold and be strong. The suffering is real. Don't let anyone fool you on that. But the end will come. Both books are sure about that. The book of Revelation concludes with its own conclusion, which is a good bit more optimistic and hopeful than the book of Ecclesiastes. Then I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. That is, sea is the origin of the sea of the monsters that come out in Daniel chapter 7. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who is seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. To those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. But to the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. It's year's end. It's time to take stock. That's a tradition. Year's ends are time to sum up. What have we been chasing? Have we been chasing vanity? What have we been trusting in? Have the places we have placed our trust been found to be trustworthy? What have been our goals? We are more responsible for our individual level, and we should listen to the teacher and ask ourselves, These hard questions, the words of the wise are like goads. They poke us. They make us uncomfortable. They ask us to look deeply at who we are and what we're doing. The global layer plays on us as well. The chaos, the beasts, the monsters, the uncertainty, the bloodbaths, they're all a part of this world. What do you need to turn away from? What new commitments should you make? How can the promise of the new heavens and the new earth be more real to you? Real enough to give you the strength to do what you need to do now.